Once, in a land cradled by towering mountains and rivers that gleamed like molten silver under the sun, there existed two great kingdoms, divided by a river so wide and turbulent that even the strongest of warriors feared its crossing. On one side, the kingdom of Lirath, ruled by a wise and compassionate king, nurtured fields that swayed like oceans of gold, and forests where the birds sang songs that lingered in the heart long after the sun set. On the other side, the kingdom of Eridane, led by a ruler of unyielding ambition, boasted armies of steel and horses whose thunderous hooves struck fear into the hearts of those who dared oppose them. In Lirath, there lived Princess Althea, a young woman whose beauty was rivaled only by her courage. Her hair flowed like liquid night, and her eyes held the calm of deep waters. But it was not beauty alone that made her remarkable. She possessed a mind that could unravel the most tangled strategies, a heart that could forgive the gravest of wrongs, and a spirit so unyielding that even the fiercest storms could not sway her resolve. Across the river, in the distant kingdom of Eridane, lived Prince Kaelen. He was a man of valor and honor, known not just for his skill in war but for his unwavering dedication to justice. Though his kingdom demanded strength and cunning, Kaelen's heart yearned for peace, for a world where children could play without fear and farmers could sow without the shadow of swords looming over them. Fate, however, is rarely kind, and the two kingdoms were destined to clash. For generations, the rulers of Eridane sought to expand their dominion, and Lirath's rich lands became a target. Skirmishes at the borders had become routine, but this time, the threat was greater. The Eridanian army, vast and merciless, moved like a dark wave across the lands, burning villages and taking from the helpless. Crops were set ablaze, livestock stolen, and families torn apart. The people of Lirath, who had lived for centuries in peace, found themselves facing horrors they had never imagined. Princess Althea could not remain idle. She donned armor not for vanity, but because she knew the lives of her people were worth more than her own safety. She rode among the soldiers, giving courage where fear had taken root, healing wounds when the healers could not reach, and inspiring hope when despair seemed inevitable. Her presence on the battlefield was like the rising sun breaking through a storm. Yet even as Althea fought, she knew that the enemy was relentless, and that battles alone could not save her kingdom. It was not enough to defend, she needed a plan to end the war. In the quiet hours of night, she pored over maps and old treaties, seeking alliances and devising strategies that could turn the tide. Her advisors, awed by her intellect and bravery, called her the heart of Lirath, for she carried the hopes of every citizen within her chest. Meanwhile, Prince Kaelen, across the battlefield, faced his own turmoil. He had been ordered to push the borders of Lirath, but each victory felt hollow. He saw villages burned, saw mothers wail over the bodies of their children, and felt the weight of every soul lost in the conquest. In secret, he began to question the orders of his father, the king of Eridane. Was victory truly noble if it was built upon the suffering of the innocent? The war escalated. Months turned into years, and the lands became scarred with the marks of battle. The once fertile fields were trampled into mud, and forests that had whispered with life fell silent. Lirath's people, though brave and loyal, were exhausted. The king, old and weary, looked to his daughter with both hope and fear, for he knew the war could consume her as it had consumed so many before. It was during the height of the war that Althea's courage led her to the front lines of a decisive battle. Eridane's forces had advanced deep into Lirath's heart, and the village of Thalorn, known for its artisans and scholars, was at risk of being completely destroyed. Althea rode into the fray with a small contingent of knights, determined to hold the line until reinforcements arrived. The clash was brutal. Steel rang against steel, arrows darkened the sky, and the cries of the wounded filled the air. Princess Althea fought with a ferocity that amazed even the most seasoned warriors. She protected the villagers, guided her soldiers, and, at one point, faced an entire squad of Eridanian soldiers alone. Her sword, shimmering under the sunlight, became a beacon of hope for her people. Amid the chaos, Prince Kaelen witnessed Althea for the first time. He saw her defend the helpless, shield the weak, and lead with unparalleled valor. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of understanding, a sense that perhaps the war did not need to claim the lives of the innocent. Yet, torn between duty and conscience, he could not act openly. Days passed, and the battle reached its climax. Lirath's forces, inspired by Althea's leadership, began to push back, yet the cost was high. Thousands of villagers, knights, and soldiers fell, their sacrifices etched into the land itself. Althea, though victorious in that skirmish, knew that the war was far from over. Each life lost was a wound upon her soul. In the weeks that followed, Althea sent emissaries to Eridane under a flag of truce, seeking dialogue and a chance to prevent further bloodshed. She hoped that reason could prevail over pride, that mercy could temper ambition. It was then that she encountered Prince Kaelen in the neutral territory of a ruined abbey, where the walls bore the scars of past conflicts. Kaelen, seeing her not as a warrior to be vanquished but as a human being striving to protect life, agreed to meet. In the silence between them, where only the wind and distant cries of the wounded could be heard, they spoke not as princess and prince, but as two hearts burdened by the cost of war. Althea spoke of the suffering of her people, the sacrifices of the innocent, and the need for peace. Kaelen spoke of duty, honor, and the pain of watching destruction unfold under his command. The meeting planted a seed of hope. Both realized that the war could not continue without endless suffering. They devised a plan, a bold, dangerous plan, to end the hostilities without further mass casualties. It required courage from both sides, and a willingness to defy the orders of those who sought conquest over compassion. Althea returned to her kingdom, and Kaelen returned to Eridane, each carrying the weight of their secret. In Eridane, Kaelen began to quietly undermine his father's campaigns, delaying attacks, misdirecting armies, and protecting those villages that were at risk. In Lirath, Althea mobilized her people not just for battle, but for survival, creating safe havens and supplying the oppressed with food, medicine, and shelter. The final confrontation came not on the battlefield but in the hearts of the rulers themselves. A secret council was convened, where Althea, Kaelen, and a few trusted advisors presented a vision of peace, backed by evidence of the suffering caused by endless war. The kings, confronted with the undeniable truth and the courage of the young leaders, were forced to reconsider. It was not an easy decision, and many argued that surrender or compromise was weakness. But Althea and Kaelen stood firm, demonstrating that true strength lay not in domination, but in protection of the innocent and respect for life. Finally, after years of bloodshed, a treaty was signed. The kingdoms of Lirath and Eridane, though scarred, began the arduous journey of healing. Villages were rebuilt, fields replanted, and families reunited. Yet, the memories of the sacrifices remained. Thousands had perished, their names carved into monuments, their bravery remembered in songs and tales for generations. Althea often visited these memorials, weeping silently for those who had given their lives so that others might live in peace. In the aftermath, Althea and Kaelen found solace in each other's presence. Though their kingdoms were no longer at war, the bond they had forged in secrecy grew stronger, built upon mutual respect, shared sorrow, and a vision for a future where children could laugh without fear and farmers could reap without dread. They became not just allies, but companions in the noble pursuit of justice and compassion. Years later, as the kingdoms prospered once more, Althea and Kaelen were celebrated not only for their leadership but for their humanity. Statues were erected in their honor, depicting the princess with her sword raised high and the prince with a gentle hand extended in mercy. Songs were sung in the streets, telling of the courage of those who had stood against tyranny and the sacrifices made by the innocent. And though the scars of war never fully faded, the land thrived under their guidance. Peace, once a fragile dream, became a living reality. Children played in fields that had once been battlefields, rivers flowed freely, and the wind carried whispers of hope to every corner of the kingdoms. Princess Althea and Prince Kaelen continued to serve their people, not as rulers separated by duty, but as guardians bound by shared love and unwavering commitment to the principles that had once saved them all: courage, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. Their story, remembered for generations, became a beacon of hope, a testament to the fact that even amidst the darkest times, light could emerge, guided by the hearts of those who dared to fight not for glory, but for the lives of the innocent. For in the end, it was not the swords, the armies, or the kings that defined the outcome of the war, but the bravery of a princess, the conscience of a prince, and the countless sacrifices of the oppressed who refused to be forgotten. And in that truth, the kingdoms found eternal peace, their people forever honoring the lessons learned through fire, blood, and unwavering human spirit.